right, let me welcome you this morning. This is one of our graduates, Christine Seitz. And Christine, when did you graduate? What was the year?
My last semester was the fall semester of 2010, and I passed the January test in 2011.
Okay, all right, so she's going to share some insights on what she's doing now, what she did to get out, what she did to pass the test. So Christine, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, my name is Christine Seitz. I've lived in San Antonio since 1990 when I came to go to University of Texas, San Antonio. I have a bachelor's degree from UTSA in history, and I never used it for any kind of professional purpose other than just to have a bachelor's degree. I worked for a long time with Aetna US Healthcare, which is just Aetna now, as a claims processor, customer service person. I did auditing. I did all kinds of things for Aetna for a long time, and then they kept trying to downsize and get rid of me, and so finally I took the hint and took my severance. And I was like, well, I need something else to do with my life, and so I don't know why, but court reporting just came to my mind one day. It was either be a nurse or be a court reporter. My dad's a nurse, my aunt's a nurse, my grandma was a nurse, so all RNs. So I thought, well, I could be an RN, you know, be like them, or, I don't know, court reporting sounds interesting. So I came to SAC because I found out they had a court reporting program, and I talked to Miss Pugh, and it was about this time of the year, early, maybe beginning of June, I don't know. But she was like, oh yeah, you'll be out in 2 years, and I said, oh, okay, great. So I told my husband, I'm going to go to court reporting school, and he says, okay. And so I got a part-time job, and I worked a part-time job the whole time I was at SAC. And I had to take a typing class, a computer typing class, to get into starting theory. And so I did that in the summer, and I got up to like 100 words a minute on my typing class. I thought, oh, this is pretty good, you know, 100 words a minute on a typewriter or a computer keyboard. I might be okay at this court reporting thing, I don't know. And so I showed up for theory. I had no idea what I was in for, and I had Mr. Dean as my theory teacher. I don't know if y'all have met Mr. Dean, but he was great. I loved that man. He was an awesome teacher. And so I had Mr. Dean for the whole year. We had theory in the fall and the spring. In the spring we started doing timed, you know, I think we had to be at 40 to 60 words a minute to get out of theory. So I passed that, no problem. And I started my speed classes. So it took me, I started in the fall of 2005, and I finished my last class that I took here was the fall of 2010. So it did take me 5 years. But I worked part-time, I had a family, I had other activities outside of court reporting. I'm a singer, I sing at my church. I'm in 2 choirs at my church, so. And at that time I was in another choir, I was in a 3rd choir, so I was kind of busy doing other stuff and maybe not practicing as much as maybe Miss Woodard or the others would have liked. But I always felt like I'm going to finish. I don't know why I felt like that. I had no basis for that feeling. But when I was in theory, I said, I'm going to finish. I'm going to be a court reporter. And so I did. And so now I'm a freelance. I've worked for the same firm the whole time. I work for Federal Court Reporters of San Antonio. Rosemary Flores is the owner of the firm. And I went to a lot of different firms when I got my CSR, and for some reason no one wanted to send me out or give me a chance. And another lady that I knew from SAC, her name is Edith, we passed the same test together. And so she was like, I'm working over here with Federal Court Reporters, so I think you should call them or email them and see if they'll hire you. So I said, well, okay, I guess, but you know, I didn't have much hope because I'd been looking for a firm for months at that point. So anyways, I called, and they were like, oh, we're having a luncheon tomorrow, so you can come in and you can meet all the other reporters, and we can meet you, and then you can start working for us. So I said, okay. So I went, and we had lunch, and then they call me, and they're like, okay, we have a job for you tomorrow at 4:30. And I was like, oh my God, my first job. And I'd been on other depots with other reporters, but, you know, of course I'd never gone by myself. So then I started a little panicking, you know, like, what have I done? But of course they sent me to an attorney that his depot, if it's a long depot, it's 45 minutes. He does not waste time. He's just gets his questions in and then that's it. So I had my first deposition. It was a doctor who was driving down Blanco Road and he hit a lady on a bicycle. And so the lady on the bicycle was suing him, and so her attorney was the one that was taking the deposition. And so it was nerve-wracking, but I did it, and I typed it up, and I turned it in, and I didn't know what I was doing because, you know, if you never made a real transcript, you have a lot of questions. So it took me forever to get this. I mean, I turned it in the time that you're allowed, which is 2 weeks, 10 business days, unless they need it sooner. But, you know, I was just a little nervous about, did I do it right? Or is there going to be a problem? But I must have done an all right job because no one ever called me and said, this transcript really stank, or you need to redo such and such. And so, like I said, I've been working there ever since. They do have a contract with the federal courts here in town, the Western District of Texas, which is huge. I mean, it goes all the way to El Paso, which we never go out there. They have reporters with another contractor over there. But I've had to go to Austin Federal Court, go to Del Rio quite a lot, San Antonio Federal Court. So I don't go to the Bexar County Courthouse, but I go to the Round Courthouse downtown. I go there twice a month and take grand jury. And to take federal grand jury, you have to do a background check. So it's like you are working for the federal government even though you're not an actual federal employee. So I had to do a whole background check and get references and go through all this stuff, get fingerprinted. Well, of course, the state of Texas makes you get fingerprinted also. But so I do have a security clearance thanks to court reporting, which is something you don't think about when you're in school. You don't think, well, I might someday get a security clearance for my work. But I'm not allowed to say anything about what happens in the grand jury. But procedurally, they bring in a grand jury and they serve for 4 months. Here in San Antonio, they serve for 4 months. So there's 3 grand juries a year, and then they're subject to being recalled up to a year afterwards. So if they need a special grand jury to hear a special case, then attorneys from other locations will come in and pair up with an assistant U.S. attorney from San Antonio, and they'll work a case together, like a white-collar crime or, you know, national security or whatever. So I have done a couple of those special grand juries also. So anyways, the grand jury is kind of cool because they come in and they hear the cases. There's agents that come in from various agencies like ICE or Border Patrol or the SAPD or DEA, FBI, Secret Service, IRS, Post Office. It's all kinds of things that you wouldn't think would come before you. So you get to see all different kinds of governmental entities at work. And the other thing I do in the federal court is I sit with visiting judges, and they come in, like in Del Rio, they only have one permanent judge, and she has her own court reporter that's there with her all the time. Her name is Vicky, and she did come to SAC for a while. She was a CSR from California, and she came to SAC so she could get her mocks to pass the state test. So she works for Judge Moses, but then sometimes they bring in judges from out of town, out of state. So I worked with judges from Louisiana and Kentucky mainly, and Ohio. Those are the ones where they come in. And then here in San Antonio, I've worked with a judge named Judge Lamberth. He's a retired senior U.S. federal judge, and he sits mainly in Washington, D.C., but he's from San Antonio originally, so he comes and sits in San Antonio so many times a year and hears cases. So earlier this year, I sat in on a trial with him. I just did one day, but it was a guy who was accused of lying on his citizenship form to be a citizen, and they claimed that he was a member of Hezbollah. And so it was a jury trial, and they found that he did lie on his citizenship papers, but they did not believe that he belonged to Hezbollah, which is what our country considers a terrorist organization. So that was an interesting case. So anyways, I don't know how I got out of school. I just came to class a lot. Hi, Miss Woodard.
She worked hard is how she got out of school.
I didn't practice as much as they would like me to say that I did.
No.
But I was very good about coming to class.
But one thing about Christine is she's very smart, very much of a word person. She knows the English language, and that helped a lot too, I think.
Yeah, I do read a lot.
You read a lot too.
Yeah, I do read a lot. If you came to my house, you would see a lot of books on the bookshelf. But I did stick with it. I didn't stop coming to school. I did come almost every day. I mean, sometimes I was sick or I had a sick kid, but you know, I didn't just say, oh, I don't feel like going, I'm not going to go, even though some days I was like, I don't want to be here, which I'm sure all of y'all can relate to. I did get stuck at several speeds. The worst one was probably 120. I had a really hard time, and I don't know why, but I passed 120 on everything except I think Q&A. And they sent me to another classroom to sit with higher speeds because I was ahead of everybody else that was in my current class. So I went across the hall. That time we were down in the basement because they were remodeling this building. One of the times they remodeled it. I don't know how many times it's been remodeled. And the girls in there were kind of mad because they had to listen to slower dictation because of me. And one of them made a comment to me and it hurt my feelings and it made me upset, and so I left the room and I cried my eyes out, and then I went across the hall to Miss Woodard's class and I passed 2 tests in one day. And that took care of my problem. But you know, I had some kind of mental thing that was keeping me from passing. Obviously physically I was able to write the speed that I needed to write, but mentally I had some kind of. And I think a lot of court reporting thing is it's muscle memory and getting your fingers used to moving in a certain way and a certain quickness. And so if you can get to that point, then the rest of it's just believing that you can do it. And I did believe that I was going, even though I got tired of people asking me, when am I going to finish? Parents, husband, friends, acquaintances, my work, they were all like, when are you going to finish this court reporting thing? But I did take the state test twice. I did not pass the first time. It was a very nice test. I was just super nervous and my fingers were real slippery and I had a lot of untranslates and I barely finished transcribing the test before the time was up. And I was printing, my printer was really slow, and they start counting down. Okay, you have 20 minutes, you have 15, you have 10, you have 5. They got to 5 and I was still printing and I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to finish this. I'm not going to even get to turn in my test because if you don't finish printing, you can't turn it in. Luckily I did finish, I printed it off and I turned it in, and I think I was in the 90s on all 3 tests, so I was pretty close. So I thought, well, you know, I didn't think it was that bad of a test, and I really should have passed it. So maybe this next time I'll get it. So that test was in Austin. The next test was in Irving, and my sister lives in Louisville, which is very close to Irving. So I stayed at her house, and I got up that morning, and I drove to the hotel, and I took the test, and I finished, and there was some person next to me, and they had some kind of issue with their printer, like it wasn't going to work. And so there's all these people standing around her trying to help her with her problem. And I was just like, no, I don't care about that. I'm just going to type up my test and get out of here. So I finished, and I think I had like 30 to 45 minutes left by the time it printed, and I turned it in. So I thought, well, you know, I think that I could have passed this one. I'm not real 100% sure. Of course, you never are unless you grade it right then. But I thought, well, I'm not going to sign up for spring because I don't want to pay money, and then if I pass this test, you know, I wasted that money. So I called Miss Pugh, and she said, no, if you don't pass, you can join us in the middle of the semester. They had some kind of flex thing. So I said, okay, good. And then there was an ice storm. It was the year that they had the Super Bowl in Dallas, and they had all that ice and snow, and the results didn't come out forever. I mean, they took an extra 2 weeks. Not just a day or two, like 2 weeks extra. We're sitting there going, did we pass? What happened? You know? And so anyways, I remember when I found out that I passed, I almost passed out at my front door because
You know right away. Tell them how you know right away.
oh, well, in my case,
When you get the envelope.
oh no, I didn't even get the envelope. I
Oh.
got home
Okay.
and I went on Facebook.
Oh,
I came home and I checked Facebook for some reason. I don't know why, but as soon as I got home, I opened up my Facebook on my iPod. Back then I had an iPod Touch. I didn't even have an iPad. And one of my friends had congratulated me that we passed. And I was just like, oh my God. And I literally almost fell over, and my daughter, I just picked her up from school, and she was like, what's wrong? And I said, Mommy passed court reporting school. She didn't care. She was in, see, that was 4 years ago. She was in first grade, so didn't mean anything to her, but so anyways, it's been a interesting career, and there's times where you're like, why did I decide I wanted to do this? Like when you're working all weekend because you took a job on Thursday and they wanted on Tuesday, which is what happened to me this past week. I took an expert witness, and it was an all-day thing, and then at the end they're like, oh, well, we have a hearing next Friday. And I was thinking, crap. So they said, when can we have it? And I said, well, Tuesday, because it was over 200 pages, so I was like, well, I'll give myself, and it was video, so with video I'm extra anal about, because they want to match up the words to they put captioning on the screen, and so the videographer has some program where they run it through and they match up what's being said with the video. So, you don't want the wrong word. You don't want the wrong word anyways, of course, but you really don't want the wrong word. So I had to go through it twice and make sure I didn't mess up anything. And then the witness walked off with 2 of my exhibits.
oh.
Yeah. I have had a witness kidnap my exhibits and lie to my face about it. That was not pleasant. But in this case, I counted all the exhibits, but somebody asked me a question in the middle of the counting, and so I lost track of where I was, and so I didn't realize that number 20 and number 21 weren't in my pile. And the witness had grabbed them, and he had taken them back to his office. So at first I thought the attorney might have taken them. So I emailed the attorney. They lived in Georgia, so they weren't in San Antonio. And she said, no, I don't have them. And I said, okay. So she was going to have the other attorney contact the witness and ask him if he had the exhibits. And I waited a whole day on Monday, and no one ever emailed me back about the exhibits. So Tuesday I had to track down those exhibits. So I got the exhibits. It turned out he had picked them up and put them in a bag and taken. He had 2 boxes like this big full of papers, and then a briefcase. And he said, well, I waited and no one, asked if I had any exhibits, so I just went ahead and left. And I said, well, I didn't realize they were gone until the next morning. So I did get them back, and that was kind of an ordeal. But the witness who kidnapped my exhibits, that one, the attorney numbered all the exhibits. I didn't do any of the numbering, and he didn't go in numerical order. He had some kind of weird order. So I had no idea what numbers I had or didn't have. And it was a 2-day job, and I took the first day, and then another court reporter took the second day. And so I was going to meet her and give her all the exhibits, and then so she would have them for the next day. So I had to go home and search through my whole transcript and jot down every exhibit number, and then I had to make a note of which ones the guy took. And see, I knew he took them because he had this thing in front of him. It was like one of those, it's a folder, but it goes like this on the front. So like you put the papers inside behind and I could see that there were papers there. And I said, are some of those exhibits? And he was like, no, these are all mine. Well, I didn't want to make a big deal about it because I didn't know if they were mine or not. So anyways, the next morning I took the exhibits to the other reporter, and I gave her the list of the missing exhibits, and I told the guy's attorney, I said, your client took these exhibits home with them, and I need them because I'm responsible for them. They're my responsibility until I turn this transcript in, and I need them back. So she was able to get them all for me. So that's the only time I've had that happen. Usually no one wants the exhibits because, you know, they're just legal papers or pictures or something, and they're not exciting at all. So I don't really know why he chose to take them. But anyways, so that's about all I can. So I don't want to ramble on. Did people have questions? Yes?
This is only a dumb question. Where do you keep the exhibits? I know that you're legally responsible. Do you keep them in a safe, or how do you keep them safe in the event, you know, while they're in your possession? How do you keep them safe?
Well, me personally, they sit on my desk at my house.
Okay.
But, like, I do have a cabinet that locks. So if I was going to be out of town or something, I would just lock them up in the cabinet and pray that my house didn't burn down. But generally speaking, when you get exhibits, they're copies of something. They're not originals. So if something bad were to happen, they could probably replace them. But, yes, ma'am?
Do you have to have any special kind of bonding or insurance?
I do carry insurance. I carry insurance on my equipment. And there's also insurance, like if somebody wants to sue you. I forget what it's called, but you can also get that also, because, you know, if somebody
You were
wanted.
talking about clearance, and I didn't know whether if you had clearance, would that mean that you had to get bonding or that you didn't have to get bonding?
I didn't have to, but you can. There's a company that sells insurance to court reporters, and they'll insure your equipment, and they'll also, sell you insurance. I forget, it's not liability, but it's some kind of thing where if somebody sues you, then you're,
Like malpractice?
yeah, like malpractice kind of. It's not as expensive as, you know, doctor's malpractice, obviously, but I've never had anybody really, you know, want to come after me for anything.
Are you a notary?
No, I'm not a notary. There is a notary at our office, but I'm not a notary.
And you work with a firm?
Yeah, I work for federal court reporters.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you first started out, what, did you shadow someone, or did they just send you out on a very nice little?
No, they sent me on my own little job. I was telling them, they sent me with an attorney they knew was going to be a short depot.
Okay.
Like, he only does 30, 45 minutes jobs, so.
So they don't send you out to the wolves?
No, but my second job I did for them, I had to go to Del Rio and take a public meeting for TxDOT.
Okay.
And I had never done any kind of public meeting whatsoever. I did not know anything about, you know, how to type up the transcript or anything, so that was kind of a learning experience. And then the first time I went to federal court, that was a last minute, somebody had a family emergency and they were in the middle of a jury trial. So they sent me out to Del Rio to take the last day of a jury trial. So my first day in federal court, I was there till 9:30 at night because the jury was deliberating. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am?
Is you, as a freelancer, are you responsible for doing your own holding for taxes and things like that? Okay.
Yes, you pay quarterly taxes. My husband and I have an accountant because he had a property that he inherited from his parents that we sold to a cousin, and we're doing the mortgage ourselves. So because of that, we already had an accountant. But if I didn't have an accountant, I'd probably get one because, you know, they tell you how much quarterly taxes you should estimate.
Is it about 30%?
That's-
They say?
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, that about 30% of
Yeah.
your earnings should be put aside for
Right.
taxes.
Yeah, and this year I didn't put enough aside, so I had to pay extra. So he upped my amount for this year. Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about the jury being in deliberation and you had to stay very close, you had to stay on duty, so to speak, if the jury is sequestered, what happened? What do you do? I mean, you have to stay sequestered?
I've never been on a trial where they sequestered the jury, but no, I wouldn't have to be. They just keep them in a separate place. And like when they go to do their deliberations, they go down to their jury room and they sit in the jury room and they talk. I don't know what they do in there really because I've never gone in, but Because it's just, the only people that are allowed in are the jury and the bailiff, the courtroom security officer. Checks on them and makes sure they don't need anything. But generally, I hang around in the courtroom and I just sit and read a book or play on the internet or whatever while I'm waiting for them. If they think it's going to be a long time and it happens to be dinner time or lunchtime or something, then everybody will leave and go eat, and then we'll come back and you leave your phone number, and if they need you to come right away, they'll call you. But that one where I had to stay till 9:30, that's the latest I've had to stay. That was a interesting case, but anyways.
I have
Yes,
a
ma'am.
quick question for you. From what I've heard, you can stay pretty busy. How do you juggle family life with work life? You know, like you said, over the weekend you had to, transcribe, put this out.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? I don't know how many children you have.
Oh, I just
That's
have
a huge
one.
concern for me. Because I have them in a lot of activities and just splitting my time is
Yeah.
a challenge.
Well, excuse me. I only have the one child, and my husband is awesome, and he's very good. But she's not in a lot of activities. She does gymnastics one night a week, so it's Monday nights that she goes. And so this past spring, I was in a class here on Monday evening, so he had to take her every Monday to gymnastics, which is only an hour long. But he had to drive her there and drive her home. And what I did this past weekend, I worked a few hours on Saturday, and Sunday we drove to Austin because my husband's cousin had a baby, and we wanted to meet the new baby. And so we were up in Austin, and we came home, and I worked for another 2 or 3 hours because I really wanted to finish that portion of the transcript, and that way Monday it wouldn't be so stressful. But I have worked late at night. I have gotten up early in the morning to work. I mean, it just depends on what I have going on. And certain times of the year it can be very slow, like around Christmas time. People want to take off. They don't want to have their deposition taken. They don't want to take a deposition. They have travel plans or whatever. So the summer can be kind of slow. Last summer was not slow, but it just depends. Like whenever you get close to a big holiday, even though I have a job this afternoon, but a lot of times you won't have a lot of things going on because of the holidays. People want to take off, so anyways.
So you take advantage of that for quality
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
So, this is in regards to, I guess, like the endurance that you have to have when you're sitting in the courtroom and you're there all day compared to when you're actually in school. And you remember how feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'm
Yeah.
burned out kind of, so to say. How does that compare to school, like, to give us advice, like, for students here who, like myself, after an hour or two, I'm like, oh, so tired, compared to having to sit
Yeah.
in a courtroom all day long. Like, how did you prepare yourself for that? Or did you just do it?
I just did it, but I mean, in court, the federal court system is different than like county court, where the court reporters don't get breaks, and they don't, if the jury leaves and the judge brings in somebody else to do a quick hearing or something. In federal court, they don't generally do that. If the judge is out, if the jury's out, the judge is out, you're out. Unless they have some kind of motion or something before the day starts, or they make you come back early from lunch. But Judge Lambert, the guy I was talking about earlier, he only does a half an hour lunch. But he wants to finish his day at 3:30. So, you're not going to be there all that, into the night. So I did that jury trial with him, and the jury was going to deliberate, and he was like, well, do you think you're going to come to a decision today, or do you want to come back? And they're like, oh, well, I guess we'll come back. So they came back the next morning, and they were done in like half an hour. So they could have just stayed and finished, but, he wanted them to go home, so. So they're kind of funny. I mean, and all the judges, they all, of course, are people, so they have different things that they like to have done. But, I mean, there's just a way they do stuff in federal court, and like I said, no one trained me on it. I just showed up, and I just kind of sat there like a lump and did my job and didn't say anything and did what people told me to do, and learned how the routine goes, so. Yes, ma'am?
Do you compare, I guess, I don't know, for me, I think one of the intimidating things that I think about is having to tell people to slow down or repeat themselves. Did you find it was difficult at first, and is it still?
Yeah, I
are you
don't
willing to
usually.
now, like, get after people, because I've talked to some court reporters that are very vocal about, like, you need to slow down, you need to repeat, or you more just kind of let them.
I generally do not, unless it's really, I cannot get it at all, then I will say, I'm sorry, but can you repeat that? Or I did a witness a couple weeks ago. It was very hard to understand, and I'm not looking forward to transcribing that thing. But, it's just, and sometimes the people are not talking too fast. It's just what they're saying. The words are hard. Like they have some kind of technical term you've never heard of before. And you just have to learn how to just do the sounds, and then later on you can figure out what that word is. You can go to Wikipedia, you can go to Google, you can Yahoo search, however you want to do it, but just put in the phonetic sounds of it, just figure out the best you can, and then later on you can look up how you really spell that word. I do that a lot with medical stuff, because sometimes, well, not a lot, but sometimes you're just like, I think it's this word, but I'm not sure, and then you get the context and you look it up, like if it's something to do with the back or the knee or whatever. So, it's just, the worst one I ever did was an engineer with dirt. Yeah, that was really, it's just hard to stay awake when you're typing it up afterwards was no fun. But I've been trying to clean up my writing and make it so when I do my transcription, it's not so stressful, because I have the words, the right words, I have them pretty clean, so it's not such a struggle when you are typing it up, because there's nothing worse than listening to something 10 times to try and figure out what the heck is that word. And, it's just, you're not going to get everything, because we're not robots. I mean, I don't even think a computer would get everything, so.
And you were on paper notes when you first started.
Yeah, no, I don't do paper anymore.
So you didn't have all the stuff that they have now.
Yeah, our student machines use paper. Well, I still have my machine. Yeah. It's a very good emergency backup.
Exactly.
I've had to use it once.
What software do you use?
I'm on Eclipse. Yeah, I started on Eclipse in theory. We voted, they brought in Stenovations and Eclipse, and they did their presentations, and then at the time Eclipse didn't charge for students and Stenovations did, and pretty much everybody in both theory classes liked the Eclipse better, so we went with Eclipse, which I think a lot of the reporters in San Antonio do use Eclipse. So.
That's what we're using.
Yeah. 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 And I've learned some stuff about Eclipse too. I mean, I've been on it for so many years, and you think, oh, I know everything about it, but the other day I was doing something, and I realized, if you mark your set of words and then you hit the quotation marks, it puts the quotation marks around it. I knew about the stitching part, because if you mark a word, you need it stitched, then you hit your dash, and it puts the dashes in for you. But and the smart keys like yes sir, yeah, yes, there's okay, all right, those are fast keys too, so those come in handy. Anybody else have
So
a
you're
question?
going on a deposition. Pack your bag for them. Tell them what they need to take. What's in your bag?
Not a lot, actually. I don't carry around an office supply store like some people. Mainly, I have my machine, of course. I have a laptop, all the cords that go with those items, the tripod, extension, power strip, exhibit stickers, a pen, and a microphone.
Do you pack a snack or something? Sometimes when you're
Sometimes, yeah, like a granola bar or something. But yeah, my one today is a doctor depot, so I'm hoping it's not going to be too long. But it doesn't start till 1:30, so I'm like, please don't go till 5 on a holiday weekend. Yes, ma'am?
On average, I know that you said that sometimes that it has a natural flux, but on average, around how many depositions do you prefer to take a week? If you could have your ideal.
2 or 3 at the most. Then you have to type them up, you know? So, you gotta have time to do that and keep your sanity.
But you're comfortable with that and making pretty good money with that.
Yeah, I've made, the amount of
You
money
have to
I've made
tell us
every
what you
year
make.
has gone up because I've taken more stuff. Every year I've increased the amount of work that I've taken. Well, and when I first started, it was right when the recession, we were like in the middle of the recession, so I think that was part of it. But the last 2 or 3 years, business has picked up a lot, and I think it's because of the oil wells and stuff, so. But yeah, and then, you know, like when I go to federal court, I don't type the stuff up right away, but then if somebody orders the transcript, you have 30 days to type that up and get that turned in. So right now I have that one day of my Hezbollah trial that I did. I have to type that up. And that's due in like 2 weeks, so I have to start working on it because I don't want to come down to the last day and then they're calling me, hey, do you have this ready?
Have you hired a scopist?
No, I don't really understand how that works, honestly. I mean, I know people love them and they use them, but I've never learned about, I mean, I know what they are, but I've never hired one. I just do it all myself.
And you probably
She's
don't
so
have the
smart,
need
she
for
can do
it.
I'm sorry?
You probably don't have the need for a scopist.
Yeah, and
No,
then,
she's very smart. She doesn't need it.
I don't know about that,
No,
but.
I do.
But, I mean, I think if you were a person that did a lot of rush jobs where you had a daily copy, you would want somebody backing you up. Like and here at our courthouse, the federal courthouse in San Antonio, they have 4 reporters, and they know when they're going to have a daily copy or a rush, and so they switch off. Each person does an hour or 2 hours in a day. And that way they can go back to their office, and work on what they need to type up from that time that they took, and that way the daily copy gets done. Because I don't know how you could do a daily copy by yourself. I mean, I did a patent trial 2 years ago, I think, here in federal court, and they come up to me that morning, the day the trial is about to start, and they're about to do voir dire, and they were like, oh, well, can we get daily copy? No. You can't. If you wanted that, you should have told my firm, and they would have sent somebody that could do, you know, real time or daily copy. So they settled for, they wanted the opening statements transcribed. So I said, well, okay, I'll do my best. And so then I had to go home after being in court all day and type up the opening statements. I had a couple of days to get it done, but, you know, it was a 4-day trial, and I did have to type it all up. But that paid for our trip to Washington, D.C. for my sister's wedding, so.
So it's worth it.
But I had to say, I didn't want to hear anything about a Bluetooth headset for a long time afterwards. I know way too much about those things and pieces of art, and there's all kinds of patent-y gobbledygook jargon that I had to learn about. So you just never know what you're going to hear about. Like, it could just be a normal car case, or it could be, God forbid, a divorce, or somebody died and they're suing the doctor or whatever. But I'd say a lot of it's car accidents.
Personal injury.
Yeah, personal injury. Somebody slipped and fell at H-E-B or whatever other grocery store, or, you know, so anyways. Any other questions?
That's very good.
Oh,
Ask
good.
now or You won't get the chance. Anybody else have anything?
You pretty much covered everything.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a problem talking, so.
No.
You did really good.
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a question. Can you work as much as you want to, or you know?
I'm not
How
an
does that-
employee, so if I need to not work, then
Do
I
you-
just tell them I'm not gonna take any jobs.
Okay.
They might not like it, but they can't do anything, except I guess they could not call me in the future, but generally if I know I need days off, I let them know, and then they have a book that they keep of their future jobs, and they'll put my name that I'm out.
How often do they call you?
Just depends on what's going on, but pretty much every day, I guess. Not every day I have a job, but several times a week they call me and tell me they have something for me. Yes, ma'am.
As a freelance, do you always, do freelance court reporters have to be associated with a firm? Or can
No.
you just be on your own?
No, you can be on your own.
So how would one go and get a job that way without having the firm say, hey, I need you to go here?
Well, the firms will call you.
Oh.
They'll have you as their overflow person. So if their regular reporters that they have can't take a job, then they'll cast their net wider and they'll see if somebody out in the, like, they get your name off the court reporters website. It's not CRCB. I forget what its new name is. Judiciary something. Or NCRA puts out a book. So if you belong to NCRA, you can put your name in the book, and then firms will contact you that way. So people I've never heard of will call me, they'll email me, but I don't work for them because I don't know them, and I've gotten burned working for a firm that I didn't know. They had me do a rush job for them, and then they didn't want to pay me for a long time afterwards. So I quit taking their phone calls, and I just don't work with them. But I mean, there's lots of firms here in town, and they're like, there's lots of reporters that just do what they call overflow. So you don't have to work for just one firm. I just prefer it that way for my personal sanity and not, feeling secure that I know I'm going to get paid on these days every month, and they're going to send me out on stuff. So, yes, sir.
In the event somebody didn't pay you, is there a legal remedy like taking, like if a mechanic's work isn't,
I think it's small claims court.
so you wouldn't be able to take a lien on your work product?
I don't know. I've never had to have that go to that level. Like I said, I kept having to contact that one firm. They weren't in San Antonio. They were in Dallas. But, I was like, I did this rush, even though when I left the depot, they didn't say it was a rush, but then they called me and they were like, oh, well, can you get it to them as soon as possible? What happened was they were doing a deposition, and the deponent and his attorney left before the taking attorney was officially said the depot was over. And so she wanted it typed up right away so she could take it to the judge and say, look, they left the room before the depot was over. So, it was kind of a weird situation, and then they didn't want to pay me in a timely fashion. So, I mean, we're not talking 6 months. We're talking like a month and a half or something, or 2 months. I think it was 2 months. But that's a long time if you're waiting for money and you did them a favor by taking their job and doing a rush, and then they didn't want to, come up with the money right away. So, but my firm, they do it's a 6-week delay. So the next time I get paid, it'll be for stuff that happened 6 weeks prior. So you can kind of keep track of how much you're going to make based on when you turned in certain jobs. Like, I never know exactly how much I'm making because I don't take the time to figure it out, but I have an idea of how much it's going to be. So, I mean, when I first started, though, they paid me right away. Like, the first year that I worked there, they were paying me differently than the other court reporters, and then they were like, can we switch you to be like everybody else? And I said, well, okay, but, I'm not going to get a paycheck for a while, so they waited till I had a nice paycheck, and then they said, okay, we're going to start you on the 6-week thing. So I told my husband, okay, I'm not going to get paid for, 2 more paychecks, and then I'll start getting paid again. So we worked it out ahead of time, so it wasn't a shock to the system, like it just turned off, so, you know. But
How much after school did you learn or did you add on during real life versus schoolhouse?
Well, you have to learn all the formatting stuff and the rules, like there's federal rules. If you take a depo for a federal, a case that's in federal court, you have to do certain things that you don't do in a regular deposition. The reporter is supposed to, this doesn't always happen, but at the beginning of a federal job, you're supposed to go on the record, you're supposed to have the attorneys introduce themselves on the record, state who all is present in the room, like if there's a videographer, you know, the court reporter. You have to say where the job is at, the address, the location, and you have to say the case of Ed Jones versus Sam Smith and case number blah 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 in the Western District of Texas. So you don't do that in a regular depo. In a regular depo, they just say, okay, we're ready to get started. Okay, let's swear the witness in and get going. So it can be kind of, if you don't do a lot of federal depositions, you can get caught up, you know, and not do that because you forget, oh, I don't have to normally do this, so I'm not used to it. But there's stuff like that that you don't know until you learn about it. But if you go to the TCRA conventions and go to the different presentations, you learn a lot of stuff there. That's very helpful, I find. And even if you like go to the official ones, they talk about how they have to send their transcripts in electronically, and I've never had to do that, so I would have to learn how to do that. So you're always going to be learning stuff. It's just, it's like any other job. It's not static. It doesn't stay the same. Something changes. The rules change. A procedure might change. How your company wants you to do a job might change. I mean, you just have to kind of go with the flow and not be like, well, I've always done it this way, so I must not ever learn how to do another thing. Which I don't think anybody realistically would do, but so, anyhow.
My last one.
Okay.
Did you focus on briefs or did you focus on stroking everything out when you were in school to get your speed up?
No, I do both. I don't exclusively brief. What I did when I was in school was I taught myself for Q&A the question and answers where you do it all in one. So like I have yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, all those. I don't think, I don't know, I understand, or do you understand? I have all those as one stroke. And so I think that helped me get through the Q&A part. But I don't do everything a brief. I do write stuff, but I try not to write medical terminology. You just have to write the strokes, basically, because I don't know how you would remember all of those if you made them into a brief. But if you know your prefixes and your suffixes, then you're going to be able to write stuff, because that's what we learned, and we were focusing on our class that I took this spring with Whitney. She really focused a lot on knowing your prefixes and your suffixes, make sure they're all in your dictionary, that you can write them easily, and that you have a distinction between prefix and suffix. Like she writes her prefixes with the J sound, like gender or jover, and then her suffixes are with a Y, so it's yover and yunder. So it's stuff like that that can help you, because when you get them in there and they're clean, then you're not thinking, oh, how do I write this? And you can move on to the next word. So under, for some reason, gives me a problem. I don't understand why that is, but I have a problem with under. So I'm working on that one. But I do try and make briefs, and like for towns that I hear all the time, like San Antonio, I use SA. Eagle Pass is EP with a star. Del Rio is DR with a star. Piedras Negras is PN with a star, because I hear those a lot. So, I mean, Piedras Negras, you don't really want to be writing out. Acuna, I do write out, but I don't hear that as often. So, That's across from Del Rio, in case y'all don't know. So, anyways,
So you have traveled a lot.
yeah, not
somewhat.
places you want to travel.
I know, but that's where the jobs are.
Yeah, I don't like to say the words Eagle Pass because then people try and send me there. Del Rio I've gone to a lot because of the federal courthouse out there. They have visiting judges so many times a year, and so I usually go out there for 4 days. And my parents live half an hour away from the courthouse, so I just stay at their house when I go. But, yeah, I've gone to Pleasanton, trying to think where else. There's some other little towns south of here I've been to. I've been to Cuero, San Antonio a lot. Luckily San Antonio's big, so, and I don't like going to Austin, but of course I've had to go there for federal court. Yeah, I'd say Del Rio is probably the place I go out of town the most.
Christine, think back to when you were in school and give them some study tips, just some practice tips, what they should do, where they should do it. You know, just to,
Well,
so they hear it from somebody else besides us.
I just had a dedicated space at my house where I practiced. At that point, it was in my bedroom. I had like a little, well, it wasn't little, it was a huge computer armoire thing. And that's where I sat and I did all my practicing. But I invaded my husband's office, so that's where I am now. So we share a room, but, you know, just kind of just, you need to, I know not everybody can have a whole room where they can go and practice, but you do need a space where you can just have your stuff. And I'm not a neat freak, so my desk, I like to have piles. I know what's in the piles, but I just like to have arrangements of things that makes me feel comfortable. So whatever makes you feel comfortable and like you're gonna be able to sit there for half an hour and do some practicing, because I never practiced for hours and hours at a time. I would practice for half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. If I was really feeling gung-ho, I would practice for about 45 minutes. But, you know, it's just, I think the best thing is to just, I got a lot of my practice at school, because for me it was, that's where you learn, is at school. And so that was my mindset was, I'm coming to school, I'm paying money to come here, so I'm just going to come here and utilize the resources here. But you do have to practice outside of school, so I was never that person that, like, I should have practiced a lot more, and then I would have been out in 3 years instead of 5, but you know, that's just how life goes sometimes. And so, anyways.
You have any other questions?
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions answered.
How many hours a day do you work? Like, what would be the length of a work day? I know it depends on
Yeah,
what you're doing, but are there days that you don't work at all, or?
Yeah, yesterday I didn't do anything. I needed a day off because of all the stress with the rush job, and I didn't have a job, so I just sat around and watched TV and I should have cleaned my house. I admit it. Should have done some laundry. But, you know, I was like, I didn't even get a weekend, because I worked on the weekend for several hours, and I was like, I need a break. But, Monday night, I think I finished work about, I think I stopped about 5, and I started about
What time did you start?
8:30. So I did about 8:30 to 5 at my house. And then Tuesday, well, that was fun. There was no air conditioning in our house. The air conditioner broke, so I was home alone with no air conditioning, but the air conditioner guy did come that afternoon and fix it, thankfully. But I think I started work about 8:30 again. It's usually when I get going. And then I worked till about 7 because I had another job that I had to turn in, and so it took me till about 7 to finish. It was a via bus meeting that I took, so it wasn't that long, but it just took me a little while to get through it, so I had to turn that in. So I'd say, you know, if it's a transcription day, I mean, it just depends on how many pages I have to get through. I try and set myself a goal, like on that, on the rush job that I did 100 pages on Friday. I transcribed 100 pages, and I thought that was really good. I don't know what other people do, but I was really happy that I got through 100, and so I just set myself goals. I'm kind of weird that way. Like when I read a book, I want to know how many pages are left, so I count off, and then I just subtract in my head. I don't know why, but that's just my thing. So when I do transcription, I do the same thing. Eclipse tells you how many pages you have down at the bottom, and then I go to the end to make sure that it hasn't grown, because it'll grow. The transcript will grow when you fill in the blanks, when you put your question symbol in and you make a new line, you know, that kind of thing. So I don't want it to grow too much. I want it to be pretty close to being right when I start working on it. So I have improved on that a lot in the last few years. So anyways. Am I done now? Can I be off camera at least?
Any other questions? Ms. Woodard, do you have any other
I
questions?
don't. We really,
Oh, Christine, that was great.
yeah. Very proud of Christine and all her accomplishments. And so we thank you for coming up and sharing,
Yeah, I'm glad I was able to come.
share with everybody, because they love to hear
Yeah.
what the day in the life is like.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird because, you know, you're so solitary and then you don't really know what other people do. Like, I have no idea how other people do what, and we do the same thing,
And it
but,
doesn't matter, you do it the way you need to do it, and
Yeah.
you get it accomplished, and
yeah,
you get that paycheck, and that's important.
yeah. And I try and be responsible and turn my stuff in when it's due or even ahead of time, so. they
Which
know-
is key, which is very key. They're not gonna call you back if you are
Yeah.
late on your transcripts. They're not
Yeah.
gonna do that. You
Yeah.
must get them in on time.
And they don't want to have to be calling and saying, well, where is such and such, or sending you emails. So, I mean, I'm pretty good about staying on top of that. And there was a time earlier this year that I had so much stuff I had to make a list, an actual paper list of what all my things were that and when they were due. And then I just crossed them off. But usually I don't have that problem, but it was just insane. It was just very busy, and then I had a lot of appeals that I had to type up, so.
And you never know when those are gonna come.
No, now those, I took a visiting judge, and so right after you finish the visiting judge, because all they do out in Del Rio when they have the visiting judge, generally, sometimes they'll do a trial, but it's very rare. A lot of times it's just sentencing the people. So they bring them in, they stand them in front of you, like 2 deep, 2 rows, and there can be 10 people in a group, 15 people in a group, and they just, and then they want an appeal. So then you have to figure out, well, what time or what group was this person in, and then you have to figure out where they are in the group, and if they're at the end of the group, you have to type up that whole group till you get to that person. So, you know, it can be kind of a challenge. So that was one of the reasons why I was super, super busy, was because I had done one of those visiting judges, and so I had my list of appeals that they emailed me, the forms, and then I have to look them up and figure out which docket they go with. So in my cabinet that I keep, I have all these dockets from federal grand jury, and I have dockets from regular federal courts. So I'm not sure how long I have to keep all that, but I'm thinking forever. No, they're criminals, so
Oh, it's probably 10 then.
yeah, and it's federal, I don't know. So, I guess I could scan, I wouldn't scan the grand jury ones because, you know, I don't want those online, but the regular dockets, I guess I could scan them and then shred. But, you know, I haven't taken the time to do that. So I've got quite a pile, but my cats love that cabinet. You open it up and they're like, oh, yay, yay, and they run over there and they climb in and they walk around and they're like, yeah, this is great. Because it looks kind of like a locker, but it's this way and not up and down. So there's 2 doors, and you can lock both doors, and so they just think that's the greatest thing. It's so much fun for them. Not so much fun for Mom, but.
Well, Christine, thank you for coming and sharing.
It's been a long time since I've been on